paint the picture of the like post-merger culture.
Oh man, it's like so strange thinking back to it because we were also all remote at the time. So that adds an extra layer of complexity.
Sure.
I mean, I handled the culture stuff using my teaching background, funnily enough. I started scheduling just little coffee chats where we could meet in small groups and just kind of start getting to know each other and talk a little bit. This sounds very silly, but I implemented some show and tell.
Okay,
So,
I love that. That's not silly.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I thought it was awesome too. And again, it came back to my teaching roots. And I thought to myself, okay, when it comes to children and like pretty much everyone, the best way of really building shared context is how I like to refer to it, is by like making new inside jokes, like getting to know people outside of work as well. The key was creating these projects that people could work on together. So regardless of, you know, which company someone came from previously, like we just encourage them to shed that from their identities and recognize that we have a new shared identity. I like to think about the idea of creating an employee value proposition. I, as a people and culture leader, have to think about, okay, for my employees, how can I make their time with us valuable as well?
Awesome. Okay. Becca, hello.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me in the studio.
You're so welcome. It's very exciting to be here.
How does it feel to be here in this wonderful black room?
It was a little overwhelming at first. What the audience can't see is the large screen with all of the faces looking back at you. Yeah. My own face, of course, granted. Right. But I think that makes it worse because it's, I think like real pros learn to not be self-conscious. Give me some time. I'll get there.
I don't know. You know, all the famous celebs are extremely fragile people.
Oh, really?
So I don't know. It's us everyday people that, you know, should feel like more empowered to be in front of cameras because, anyway, whatever. We won't theosophize about cameras in everyday society and social media and stuff, but it is an absolute pleasure to have you with me for so many reasons. One, because this is part of our ongoing gathering series, a near and dear to my heart project where we're sitting down with people in people and culture, HR positions, supporting teams in whatever capacity, and kind of trying to survey and get a sense of, you know, what are the needs of teams in Canadian companies, and how can the lessons that you'll share on the mic today help other people that will be in this room as part of the series. So it's kind of this like peer mentorship experiment. The other reason is because we have a little bit of history with Ace, which we could dig into in the session. But I think it's another one of these kind of growing Canadian brands that's really rooted in Toronto and has had a really interesting growth story. So I'm really happy to have you here to kind of relate your take on that. And let's jump into it.
Cool, yeah.
So how, people and culture is such a weird thing because almost every single person that's been on our podcast series for Gathering has told me that they came into people and culture because they were really good with people. They like being around people and helping people. What was your entry into that kind of like, into that world, into that job description?
Yeah,
title?
it's I can totally see how that's the case, and I think my story's not dissimilar. Just anecdotally, I feel like a lot of people fall into HR or people in culture, which I certainly felt like I did. So I think to tell the story, I do have to back up quite a bit.
Yeah. Rewind.
You're right. Rewind.
Rewind selector.
And we'll jump back to when I was in school. I did not study HR.
Okay.
I did not study business.
Yeah.
Instead, I studied English literature and
nice.
history.
Okay.
So super relevant.
Yeah.
I also studied teaching. So I did the concurrent education program at Queen's, graduating in 2018. And it was a 5-year program where you end up with 2 degrees that you work on simultaneously. So yeah, I think like one of the things that led me towards that path in general was that as a kid, I was never someone to really pursue things that I wasn't already good at.
Interesting.
So yeah, this kind of goes into this whole idea of like the locus of control. But the way I picked my career path was basically, what traits do I currently have?
Right.
You know, X, Y, Z. Okay, if I have these traits, then that kind of limits me to these options. So yeah, like I think it's a bit of an unfortunate way of limiting yourself. And I think like I'm not the only one who falls into a trap like this. But I ended up studying what I studied, liked it, but was like, I think it's okay. Like it's a career path. It's stable. And
what would have been that career path for you though?
Oh, just teaching, teaching in high school.
Right.
Yeah, being an English and history teacher. So I stuck it out, even though I knew that, I didn't know that I was the most passionate about it. And what I actually was very passionate about during my time in school was the part-time job that I had throughout university.
Okay.
And that was working at our campus pub and nightclub. So I started off in my first year as working in the kitchen and cooking and being like the coat check person at the nightclub. Super fun. And then in my second year, I was a server. And then in my third year, I became a manager. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my foray into alcohol, if you will.
I thought you were going to say hospitality.
I mean, that too.
Yeah, but alcohol. Okay, the wonderful world of alcohol.
Right, exactly. And it was really neat seeing not just like what kind of went on into the operations of, a hospitality establishment like that, but also like purely in the alcohol part of things, like working with the vendors that would come in, being able to taste test the new products. And I just thought that it was really cool. And in between my fourth and fifth year, that's like where you wrap up your bachelor's, and then in September you start like your full-time teacher's college. In my head, I was like, okay, this is my last chance to like do something totally unrelated to teaching before I am a teacher forever.
For life.
Exactly. Because I still thought of it as that like lifelong career path.
Because that's a very Ontario thing too, a Canada thing, right? For our audience, it's global. It's kind of like you also don't make, what shall we say? You won't be comfortable with your salary unless you have tenure as a teacher, right? So you're like, which might be, 8, 12 years or something. So
exactly.
In the public school system.
Right. It's a system very much based on seniority, not just in terms of salary, but even like the placement of school that you go to, or even having a full-time job in general. When I graduated, it was very much like a grinding game of like being on a supply list and then being like a preferred supply teacher and then becoming like, maybe you pick up a couple of teaching contracts. It takes a while before you get up to the point that you are like a steady teacher at a particular school. So yeah, like it really is something that is a long journey, and the thought of it was very daunting in my head as well. I mean, I feel daunted just like talking about it now. So yeah, that summer was very much like, okay, time to do something that is totally unrelated before I'm like, stuck. It sounds kind of bad, but
married to your career.
Exactly. Like you're in this very long career path. So I applied to a bunch of different things. There were some interesting jobs out there, I will say, but I did eventually find this little company called Iconic Brewing Company. Okay. Located in Toronto. Not too far from here, right at the corner of King and Bathurst. And the job description read that it was a part-time kind of sampling opportunity. We're out there trying to connect with consumers and have them taste test our products. And I said, okay, like ideally it would have been full time for the summer, but I'll take what I can get. And it sounds interesting. Yeah. So I applied and they accepted me. I was like, okay, cool. And I show up for my first day of training to 2 people in a very small office. We were teeny tiny back in the day. A couple others who had joined for the orientation as well. And we just spent the morning learning the different products that we had and like talking about tasting notes and running a couple like role play scenarios where I could practice selling to a customer. Again,
and they were brewing there on site.
They still weren't. Yeah, we weren't. Because we've always relied on like a co-packing production model where we work with manufacturing partners who do it for us, but we kind of do the R&D internally and the marketing and sales. Yeah, which we can talk about further on because I think that is still really neat.
Yeah, of course.
Again,
so
like
you show up their first day in this like empty place.
Right. It's like a tiny office. Yeah. And again, like I always considered myself good at talking to people. That's why I ended up in teaching. And like I think I did decently. My bosses at the time seemed to think so too. And they, at the end of the day, pulled me aside and basically said, hey, we really liked you. I know that originally this was supposed to be, like a part-time job doing some samplings, but would you like to be our intern for the summer? Like doing full-time hours. And I was like, oh, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. And thus began my actual career in the beverage alcohol industry. And yeah, being a startup, and like maybe this is something that you'd be familiar to, you wear a ton of hats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you do everything. It doesn't matter, what the task is. If it's something that's of deep importance, everyone puts down their things and helps out.
Right.
So that was like the epitome of what that summer looked like. It was the first year that we launched a brand that you might be familiar with now, Cottage Springs. And at the time, there were only like 2 SKUs or 2 products. But
so you said this was Iconic Beverage Company.
Iconic Brewing,
which is
right?
Ace.
Yes, which is now Ace. So this is a snaking long path.
I see. This is how it comes together.
It will come together in a few years' time, I promise. So yeah, I spent the summer like on Monday to Friday, I'd be like cold calling the LCBO, doing sales stuff, trying to get them to bump up inventory and whatnot. And then sometimes on the weekends, I'd be working at the various events that we had, serving at like beer fest and rib fest right beside the co-founders. We were very entrepreneurial. We like believed in like hustling and grinding hard. It was a really competitive industry. It still is.
Yeah, maybe more so now.
Probably more so.
Because we're talking what year? This is a few years
2018.
ago.
2018.
2018, yeah.
Right before the seltzer explosion. Right?
The seltzer explosion.
That's how I like to think about it. As a category, it's just grown tremendously, but right around that time was when consumers were just starting to dip their toe into the pool of, no sugar drinks or better for you drinks. And that was something that we were kind of riding the wave of, that we saw it coming and we were like, all right, we got to get on this. And we really nailed it with our first 2 products, which were the Cottage Springs Ontario Peach and Lemon Lime vodka sodas. So yeah, I basically spent that summer doing everything as needed. It was really fun. I loved it a lot. There's always a little voice in the back of my head saying like, okay, but I know you like this. This is not related to what you studied at all.
Is this your real job, or are you just biding time? Are you
exactly.
Is this a summer gig that's taking too long?
Yeah, that's very much what I like thought about, and my family talked to me about too. Like they were like, yeah, you can have fun, but remember, you went to school for a particular thing. You're gonna have a job in that thing. And I was like, okay. So September rolls around, and I'm like, oh, time to go back to school. Time to be a teacher forever. Yeah. But I wasn't really ready to let go yet. So I talked to the founders of Iconic Brewing and told them like about my situation and let them know that, hey, like if you do still have anything you'd like me to do, like if I can do that from school, like I would still love to be involved in any capacity. And thankfully they said like, oh, of course, we always have work for you to do. Right. So they let me do that. We'll skip ahead because again, the teaching stuff, not too relevant. But by the time I finished up teachers college, I was still like, okay, I know this isn't for me still. I'm still thinking about this company that I love so much and the work that I'm doing there. So upon leaving school, they offered me a full-time job. Again, just kind of being a jack of all trades, like doing what was needed.
So the time in between was how long?
So from 2018 to 2019, I'd say.
Oh, just a year. Okay.
Right, just a year.
But they'd grown, I'm guessing, since?
Right, yeah. When I joined, I was employee number 7.
Wow, okay.
So we were small on the day, and I'd say since maybe we had grown to maybe around 15 people by 2019. Yeah, so that was really cool. I appreciated the fact that they gave me all these opportunities and they were letting me try a bit of everything. Yeah. And yeah, I was really that person who's always been about like, I'm for the team, like whatever the team needs, I'm there. Doesn't matter if it's like something I already know how to do or don't. If I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out and then I'll do it. So yeah, anytime there was some kind of opportunity for me, they were like, hey, would you like to try this? And I said, of course. So I got to try, again, I did some sales, I did some marketing, I did some events. I dipped my toe into logistics a little bit, like coordinating orders and deliveries, route planning, a little bit of e-commerce, especially once the pandemic hit in 2020. That was a big moment where, everyone in alcohol in Ontario had to really pivot. Right. Because, restaurants were closed, like a lot of things had shut down, like the LCBO was closed for a while too. We turned to a direct delivery model where I became the order coordinator and route planned every morning. And then like pretty much everyone in our company became drivers.
Oh, wow.
Overnight. But that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah, it sounds like steam whistle.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they used to do in the beginning.
Right, exactly.
And that's their like love of their cars, right? The green old cars, heritage cars. But so this is interesting. Okay, so you came back to it. You guys were growing. Pandemic hits. Everything becomes about kind of like direct to consumer a little bit more. And on that logistics front, you'd have to build out a bunch of stuff to fulfill direct orders. What was that picture like in terms of how you guys scrambled to get something together to actually pivot?
Oh man, I think there was a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes. I'm sure there was panicking because again, putting myself back into that time, like we really didn't know how long this was going to go on for. What we knew is that we were committed to not laying anyone off because we understood that this might just be temporary and we don't want to lose the talent if we can help it.
Yeah.
So we turned instead to, again, like looking to find if we could find someone who had a license that we could, a liquor license that we could leverage and then use that to then sell alcohol as well. Because again, since we didn't produce our own alcohol, we technically didn't have our own premises or our own liquor license to be doing this. So it was a little bit of a loop around, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And like we made it work. A loophole. That's the word. Thank you. But we made it work. And I think we've always been about that. Like those little tricks, those little loopholes. Like,
because you got to be agile.
You got to be agile.
And you're in an industry where though there's differentiation, tons of products in the marketplace to compete against, you also have mainstay brands that are, of course, like I don't even know how the market share breaks up, let's say locally in Ontario. Do you know the stats on like how many different breweries there are or how many different brands in play for, let's call it beer.
Right.
And then of that, what the market share ownership is for the big 2 or big 3 breweries.
I got to admit I'm not I'm not a stats person at all, but your inclination is spot on from what I know.
Right.
What we have been seeing from a personnel standpoint and like just looking at the various companies is that it first started in craft beer and now it's in seltzers. There's a boom in which, a lot of people see this trend. They try to jump in on it and they make these products. They realize that now the market is oversaturated and it's hard to really differentiate yourself. And the way that a lot of breweries are staying alive these days is through acquisitions. So you'll see that there's lots more consolidation. These bigger companies are snatching up all the smaller companies and that helps them, take over more regional parts of market share where like those brands may be doing really well, but in the grand scheme of things, they might not be the big time players. And the big time players are just like that's how that's what their growth strategy is looking like these days, just acquiring others.
So through the pandemic 2020, 2021 as things started, like maybe retail sales and like B2B business started picking up after that 2-year kind of period. I keep telling, it's funny, I keep telling people, funnily enough, just this week, reminding people that Q1 last year, Ontario was in lockdown. Like it was a year ago.
Right.
So though everyone's kind of the mindset, especially now as the weather warms, they're going to be like, oh, forget about the pandemic. It was so long ago. It was Middle Ages. It was last year, Right. So the business realities were definitely restrictive up until very recently. And even then, retail hasn't necessarily picked up, right? So where were you guys at in terms of growth, kind of, let's call it like at the beginning of last year, like 2022?
Yeah. I think I might even jump back a little bit to like the very end of 2020 where, again, we started to get used to this new model. Thankfully, at this point, we were allowed back into the LCBO. Like they were allowing for our sales team to enter again and do their business with restrictions, of course. Yeah. But
for samplings and
stuff. For samplings and just like working on displays and everything. But again, like we saw the direction that a lot of the market was going in about consolidating different companies and looking to, just like really hold on to their place in the market. And our founders at Iconic Brewing Company had been longtime admirers of the founders at Ace Hill. So they started talking like through 2020. Yes. And they were kind of just like, oh, like what's going on over there? Like, what are you guys doing? And I think sharing some best practices that way as well. It turns out that Ace was doing something very similar to us. They also had a very similar ethos of, hustling, like making things work and just looking for solutions whenever they could. So as the founders talked more, they realized, hey, you know what? Like Ace Hill has beer. Iconic Brewing doesn't have beer.
Mm-hmm.
And while both companies have a vodka soda, like there's still like little things that are different. And even in terms of the personnel, like some things that Iconic Brewing was missing, Ace Hill had, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So as those conversations progressed, it led to a merger between the two companies, which is right around the time that I also stepped into the people and culture role, purely out of necessity, I think.
Yeah. Someone had to do it.
Right, someone had to. We were like around 25 employees at that point.
At
and
Iconic.
At Iconic,
Okay.
yeah. And then we understood that, we need someone to help look after this kind of stuff. And I'm sure, like, while I wasn't privy to these conversations at the time, like maybe our founders were also thinking we're also going to need someone to help once, we've merged and manage the culture that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I stepped into the role, and then shortly after the merger occurred, and we immediately doubled our headcount to around 50 people total.
So
as
they were
Ace
about
Beverage
25.
Group. Right. They
on
were
the other
also
side.
about 25.
Okay.
Yeah. So very similar companies to begin
Yeah.
with. And thankfully, their culture was quite similar as well.
So what does that mean? Paint the picture of the like post-merger culture. Like what is the culture of now, I guess just Ace Beverage Group?
Right,
Okay.
right. I'd say, oh man, it's like so strange thinking back to it because we were also all remote at the time. So that adds an extra layer of complexities,
Sure.
Getting to know people through a computer screen or over Slack. I'd say in general, everyone was, curious
Yeah.
about each other. Like we had never really met everyone on the other, on the other
Other
side of the pond.
screen.
Yeah, on the other side of the screen. Everyone was just kind of like interested and, looking forward to what the future had to offer because we understood that having joined forces, our resources suddenly doubled and we have a lot more firepower in terms of, the products that are in our portfolio, the people that are available to us and just various resources. So I think in general, like when I stepped in to start managing the culture, this was also like my first foray into people and culture. So there was also kind of that extra thing to think about.
What do I have to do in this position?
Like from a compliance perspective to like the cultural perspective. So, I mean, I handled the culture stuff using my teaching background, funnily enough. I started scheduling just little coffee chats, not unlike what we're doing right now, where we could meet in small groups and just kind of start getting to know each other and talk a little bit. And another thing that I did was, this sounds very silly, but I implemented some show and tell.
Okay,
So,
I love that. That's not silly. That's awesome.
I thought it was awesome too. And again, it came back to my teaching roots. I thought to myself, okay, I understand that, people maybe will organically talk to each other a bit as they're working, but like, how do we break those silos? Because you might only be working with a handful of people within teams. And I thought to myself, okay, when it comes to children and like pretty much everyone, the best way of really building shared context is how I like to refer to it, is by like making new inside jokes, like getting to know people outside of work as well.
Right.
And we're all working from home. So I thought to myself, I have knickknacks at home. I'm sure other people do as well. So why don't I schedule, again, like small groups? And the only prompt I'm going to tell people is, please come prepared with an item that you would like to show to others. And you can talk a little bit about what it is. Maybe it's significant to you. Maybe it's not. It could be a little trinket. Maybe it's like something you brought back from vacation. And we got to hear some really interesting things. I still remember some of my teammates back then and like the items that they shared because it just created such a strong
What's
first
the weirdest
impression.
thing someone shared?
Oh, gosh. The weirdest thing. Honestly, none of them were that weird. A lot of them were really like cool. Like definitely a lot of trinkets from vacations that people had gone on. Like I thought that was something that was neat.
Like a treasure chest full of gold that someone dug up from a broken pirate ship in the Bahamas.
I wish if they had that, they wouldn't be working with us. They'd be good.
They're like, guess what, guys? I only have this job for fun.
Yeah.
I don't need the money. And everyone's freaking out. What do you mean?
That would be cool. But no, we just saw a lot of neat things and we got to know each other a lot more that way.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too with any merger or acquisition is it's hard to shake the fear and insecurity about what it means for your own job.
Honestly, yeah, people get freaked out. And it's a tough thing, even from a leader standpoint, to communicate clearly because there's things you can't say until a certain time. There's also your head's probably as the leadership team trying to close a deal and work on logistics. You got a lot of work in front of you. So it's very difficult, especially with this like small, medium-sized team. if someone if you weren't there, owning that role of trying to like bridge these communication gaps. That's interesting, but that's good thinking to try and kind of break the ice and humanize this like growth stage.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly what my goal was. I really like the term you just used, is humanizing. I wanted people to realize like, hey, these are people as well. They're going to be working on our team just like we have, these past few years. We don't need to be afraid of each other.
Yeah.
We're ultimately all just trying to get by, do our jobs, and like that's really it.
Yeah.
And I think once people kind of understand that and they come to a mutual understanding about that, they can relax from a personal standpoint, and that's when they can start making connections.
So how did you so then I guess as people came together, like what's been the journey of kind of like the post merger, post remote work Zoom reality?
I think it's been awesome. It has taken a couple of years because we had 2 offices as well. So there was like the physical merging that had to happen. Like we ended up leaving our office at King and Bathurst due to the building being demolished. I don't think we would have left if we could help it.
It was just stay there forever.
Yeah, that building is ancient but so fun and has so many memories in it. But it was really cool. Like, I think the key was creating these projects that people could work on together. So even in like, physically relocating offices, regardless of, which company someone came from previously, like we just encourage them to shed that from their identities and recognize that we have a new shared identity. Like, okay, so if I'm the one who's like managing this transition process, I might say, hey, who wants to come with me to that old office, pick up some things, maybe laugh at some old memories. I'll tell you some stories and some old jokes about things that happened here. And people from both sides put their hands up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that was key. So those shared projects were a really big thing. I think the other thing too was I like to think about the idea of creating an employee value proposition.
Okay.
Kind of like the way how any company thinks about their own value proposition about what they're bringing to a market. I, as a people and culture leader, have to think about, okay, for my employees, how can I make their time with us valuable as well? So on returning to work, I tried to do a lot of different things to really make our office fun.
And, what are some examples?
You're like, taking notes.
Intrigued. Color me intrigued.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of really cool things that we've implemented since, you could call it like Q1 of last year, where we really returned to work properly.
Yeah.
For one thing, like sprucing up, like silly things like it's the snacks that we have available, like having coffee available to people. That wasn't something that we always did. The other thing too, from a more physical perspective, was that we made changes to the space so that people could work closely and work on the same level. So at our office now, which is located like up at DuPont and Dufferin, it's a big open, like it kind of looks like a co-working space. It doesn't look dissimilar to what you guys have going on here, actually. Cool. But people are people can chat, they can be working on things, but then you could just look over and chat with someone. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. There's still breakout rooms so that if you want to have a private conversation or have a smaller team meeting or even just have a space to work away from others, like whatever the reason.
Focus or privacy, right?
Totally, right? Everyone has a different working style that works best for them. So like those little changes there. From an innovation specific standpoint, we've always very much prided ourselves on innovation, and our company values are based on innovation as well. So we thought about ways of encouraging innovation always. And one of the things that our director of innovation has done is she's created an innovation station on one of the walls. Okay. So her team will create various flavors, and they rotate on a weekly basis. Imagine like a Starbucks pump, how you can order different pumps of things. Okay. It could be like 2 pumps of blue raspberry, 1 pump of Concord grape, and you just pump them into, a glass or something. And then you could top it up with sparkling caffeinated water, sparkling water, and also vodka soda for our happy hours.
I like this.
Yes.
This is interesting.
Yes. So it's super neat. It's something that everyone loves. It keeps us hydrated. It keeps us energetic. And, the hope is that people start thinking about flavor combinations. They try things outside of the box. And although it hasn't happened yet, we are hoping that maybe one day it will lead to a product idea. Right. Because I think that would be really neat. So there's a fun little idea there for you.
Well, wait, I need to hear more about this sparkling caffeinated water.
Yeah. So we have a sister company called Wake Water. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, they are also based in Toronto. It was an idea that our co-founders at Iconic made and then eventually spun off into its own business because it was really taking off.
Huh.
But they created a ready-to-drink energy drink that is sparkling caffeinated water, starting with a grapefruit and lemon flavor. And the whole thing was that, in a lot of these energy drinks that currently exist on the market, they're full of all these other additives, like other things that you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of crap to give you a heart attack.
Right, and a lot of sugar too was the big one. So they developed a product that was no sugar. It's using a green tea base for caffeine. Okay. So in addition to the caffeine, there's also a compound called L-theanine, which naturally exists in green tea, and it helps to counteract some of the more anxiety-producing symptoms that can come with just drinking coffee or caffeine regularly. So you get like the energy for sure, but you also don't get that crash that some people would, or the jitters, which is really nice. So it's delicious. We use the exact same liquid in our sparkling caffeinated water system at the innovation station, except this way, you're not bound to whatever is currently available in can form. Right. You can make whatever flavor you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's fun. So a little bit of animation and opportunity for serendipity and people to have fun together in the office.
Right. And a very literal water cooler, almost an upgraded water cooler, if you will.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, we've definitely seen the popularity of that. Just water alone. We have a couple of different hydration stations at StartWell, and sparkling water on tap itself is magic.
It is. It really is. I think sometimes what we've learned is that people want just some levity in their life. They want something to really make them feel excited about it. And I think it's an added bonus when it's an opportunity to step away from your desk and just chat with people, talk to them about what's going on outside of work. And I think it's moments like that really make connections.
Yeah.
It's so hard to replicate virtually is something that we've learned.
I don't think you can. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm all for the remote worker revolution, that North Americans are high on right now. Mm-hmm. But just in terms of saving people, the inconvenience of long commutes and the expense of unnecessary gas and environmental damage and all that stuff's valid. But it's bloody wicked to spend time with people that you really enjoy the company of and that you have fun with.
Right.
And I don't believe you can replicate that digitally. It just as someone who I used to be in the open source software community for many years, in different open source projects, managing teams that were, thousands of developers around the world. And that was a good decade almost that I was doing that. And that was back in 2005, before that. Whoa. 2 decades of doing open source work. Yeah. So for 20 years, I was working with remote teams all over the world. Mm-hmm. And it was cool. But all those communities always had some form of meetups in their local regions and, a global annual conference, because working only remotely doesn't necessarily give people that positive feedback of the collective, of the experience of the collective.
Right.
And that can be so empowering. If people share values and are excited by their company in real life, that feeling of collective pursuit enables that kind of motivation, and I think gives it energy, and it gives people the energy to keep feeling committed to their purpose.
100%. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point that you make too, because it's something that I've noticed in having everyone be back in the office, in a hybrid capacity. Yeah. Some more than others. Some, like myself, are in 4 times a week, so pretty often. What it has really done is also in strengthening those connections, it has, in a sense, built a more innovative workplace.
Okay.
And I really attribute that to just the fact that people feel a lot more psychologically safe. And it's actually, to me, it's...
Being together, you mean?
Yeah, being together, it feels psychologically safe. Knowing your coworkers outside of the screen means that, you understand their intentions. You understand, you trust them. You just like understand the best way of communicating with them, and with that all together, it creates a workplace where people understand that, like, hey, I know that that person is like there for me. I know that I can trust them. I know that if they give me if I give them an idea and they provide me feedback, that's not them attacking me. It's us working towards a shared goal.
There's so much gray area in communication with just pure digital. Yeah, that assumptive anxiety is very difficult to overcome. Yeah. So that's cool that you guys are kind of like back in action and for the first time in a way.
Right. Yeah. I think we've definitely been hitting our stride. Summertime is a time that we look forward to a lot because we're all generally in office a lot more. We have like a team of awesome interns who are joining us too. Nice. So our headcount grows pretty significantly. And it's definitely our busiest season as well, given that, people do generally tend to enjoy beverages the most when it's warm out. So we've started implementing like weekly all hands to like, we call this period like the 90-day sprint prior to the Victoria long weekend.
Okay.
So the May long weekend, like May 2-4.
Right.
Because that's the time where we believe that everyone starts picking out their drink of the summer. So by May 2-4, you've decided on your drink.
This is some 20-year-old thing. Picking your drink out for the summer.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept. Maybe it's not a 20-year-old thing. I don't know. What's the demo on that? Like, what kind of age set are we talking about? Is that everybody picks out a drink for the summer?
I think it's probably a Gen Z millennial thing.
I've picked out a drink for the decade. I stick with my red wine, of course, variations of, but
so
Lambrusco in the summer.
You'd be a hard person to win over, but with Gen Z and millennials being so, or like with TikTok and Instagram and other social media driving their own consumer choices and preferences, we understand that they can be a fickle crowd, and it's like every year we have to work again at winning them over. So this time period is so crucial for us. Like, we're just trying to get as many people trying our products as they can, recognizing our products so that the next time they stop by a store and they see Cottage Springs or Ace Hill on a shelf, they're like, oh yeah, I think I saw that somewhere. Like I saw someone from my school drinking that, or like, oh, I heard about that new flavor. I should check it out. And then it leads to, incremental sales that way. Yeah.
No, especially coming out of that kind of like the pandemic where, actually this might be the first, realistically, this is the first real summer return to IRL in Ontario.
Right.
It's interesting. One other thing, of course, that's interesting is a few years ago, I don't know if this is still the case, Ace Hill became the drink on board Porter Airlines.
Yes.
Is that still the case?
No, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah, the contract is now with someone else.
So it rotates every few years.
It rotates every once in a while. But that was such a cool way of really cementing like what a Toronto staple that Ace Hill is.
Yeah.
I attribute this to how powerful our on-premise team is. And we call on-premise anywhere where you can both purchase and drink alcohol at the same spot. So like, a concert hall, a restaurant, a bar, and in this case also Porter.
Right.
Like they have been doing so much work to get us out there. And I think when you go to, these small and local places like a bar or restaurant and you see our products, like an Ace Hill beer, for example, you're just like, oh, this is what we drink in Toronto.
Right.
And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. In fact, Ace Hill was the first beer that we offered to on campus when we were primarily what would we say, a startup focused kind of co-working space in 2017 at StartWell, and we had kegs here and there or keg fridges, and it was all like self-serve, which was crazy back then, thinking of those high times of startup revelry. But yeah, so we had like Ace Hill on tap, and people were basically enjoying it back when there was just two Ace Hill beers. I think there was a Pilsner and a lager.
Yeah. The white and blue can, right?
Yeah. And made it easy, And we were proud. Because it was definitely a Toronto play, and it that synonymity was there. So
definitely.
Team growth. What does it look like, and how comfortable do you feel in your role as you've kind of been stewarding a culture for the company in the next couple of years? Like next year, what's ahead past this summer season?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I'd say last year was our era for meteoric growth, where like quite literally, again, we added our head count quite a bit. We're slowing down now because we understand that we've assembled an amazing team, and we want to like really develop everyone and make sure that everyone has a chance and opportunity to grow further in where they are, myself included, actually. So what I've done for myself is, I do feel like I've come a long way from initially stepping in 2020 with no HR background and like learning on the fly. But I attribute that to having amazing mentorship from my own supervisor, who is the CFO at our company. And he's been an amazing source of, pushing me to develop my own business acumen, to develop my skills in helping to manage people, and always reminding me that even though I'm a team of one, so I'm the sole HR individual at our company, in a sense, my stakeholders and my clients and my customers are the rest of the team. So that's something to always take into account, is that I need to have the same, customer service mindset and that like stewardship in order to really be serving my own people the best that I can.
Sure.
And I do so with bettering myself professionally. I'm doing courses outside of work as well. So I do one course every quarter, working towards a designation in HR, which the company is supporting me through. And I'm so grateful to them.
Nice. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Understanding that, everything that I learn out there, I can bring back as well. And really like help make us stand out even further and just really like improve that award-winning culture that we're known for.
Well, this is what this gathering series is all about, because I found that there's so many professionals in this space that come to various roles in supporting teams. Even if they did have scholastic training, in sociology and whatever it is, human psychology and HR, organizational behavior, things evolve so fast, especially like we've mentioned just in your short career history of talking of something like the pandemic, taking work remote, and then a merger happening, and now you've got to steward the change in people's expectations and how they interrelate digitally and then in person, and then preparing again now for growth. And there's so much that you've already been privy to. How are you otherwise finding, if at all, sounding boards and mentors within this kind of type of role? Do you have a posse of HR people that you've... Because I know everyone ends up in their silo, and they're very busy in this role. So it's hard to even kind of like find time to meet other people in different companies that are in the same roles. Is that...
Yeah, I hear you on that too. I think there's a couple ways of tackling it in my experience. There's a very structural way in the sense that like one of the goals that my mentor and I at work have set for me is doing like 3 networking chats every quarter. So like quite literally, I'm held to that KPI. It's not a burden to me. I really like it. It's basically an excuse to go get coffee and meet someone new and, try to hear about what their own experience has been and glean whatever insights I can. So that's been something that's been amazing. In the course of working towards my designation, there is the Human Resources Professional Association as well. So I've attended just one event so far, but I've met some lovely people there, and we have plans to keep meeting. And I think finally, the last thing is that good HR insights don't only have to come from others in HR. And that's something that I've learned. So at our own office, we have developed like a little bit of a culture committee. And it's of these people who have always been like comfortable sharing ideas about things that we can be doing. Like, hey, like what about if we tried this? Like, I think that could be really cool. And they don't work in HR. Again, I'm the only person. But they've just always been so good and so insightful that that's sometimes awesome. I like, why do the heavy lifting myself? Why do I have to be the idea generator? If someone comes to me with a great idea, then I think to myself, why don't we do that? Let's run with it.
Culture should be participatory. And it's funny because it's something that kind of does take that open dialogue within an organization to steward, because otherwise people fall into all these silos of like productivity and focusing on like whatever the milestone for achievement is. And everyone's doing their own thing very functionally. And they might have pauses here and there to hang out, but without making culture a topic of discussion in the organization. Yeah, I think anyone in that role would be kind of lacking, but also would feel disengaged from the people that they're working with. So
Right. I
Cool.
think, yeah, it's been an interesting journey, is merging innovation deeply into the root of our culture.
Yeah.
Because we've effectively turned innovation into our culture.
Nice.
So one of the things that we do, and I think, again, this builds into our culture and how like we build it, is an innovation day. So a couple times each year we hold what I like to think of as a one-day Dragon's Den competition.
Cool.
Yeah, hearkening back to our own co-founders appearing on Dragon's Den initially with their product idea. But we gather everyone in the company, we put them all into different teams, so they're working with people across departments. And that morning we say, okay, you have until this afternoon, you're going to create a product idea. You're going to work with marketing and create the packaging.
This, yeah.
You're going to work with innovation and make the liquid. And in the afternoon, you're going to present it in front of a panel of judges from the CPG industry. So we've had like founders from Flow Water, BioSteel, like some VPs from Loblaws and everything, just to add extra credibility and for their insights. And people get really into it for sure, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's a great team building exercise.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
the organization also benefits because we've taken these ideas and we've actually created them.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
amazing.
It's so great. Like, it makes everyone buy into doing beyond what their job is and
Yeah.
understanding that there's a bigger cause than that. So, yeah, it's one of the most unique things about our company. I think it's a great example of exactly how we've turned innovation into our culture.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons and insights that you've kind of been picking up through your career journey, and it was awesome to hear them and share some of these stories. But also, we're going to actually be good about it. I've been very bad about keeping this as a monthly thing. But starting in May, we're going to be doing this like a social, so the Gathering Social, which is just a kind of a happy hour sort of situation, a Sanka set once a month on a Thursday, to bring our audience for this series together in Toronto to be able to kind of like meet each other and just jam on ideas. And every month we'll have a talk. And I'd love to kind of involve you in a panel talking about this. I think fun and innovation seem to be like two pillars of your approach, which I'm sure people would love to hear anecdotes from and jam on.
Yeah, I would love to be there.
Awesome.
And we'll bring the beverages.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Well, thanks for joining me today. It was awesome to have you on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I had such a blast.
Nice. Nice.